Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with one of my absolute favorite Benjamin Britten orchestral music discs. You know, Britten did not write tons of orchestral music, but there's quite a bit if you suck it out from his operas and, other things. You can kind of figure it out, but there are a few actual orchestral works as well, and most of it is just wonderful. The only piece of his that I really don't care for is the cello symphony, which I think is just kind of ugly and gnarly and unpleasant to listen to, and I'm not quite sure what he's getting at in that particular piece. So much, cow-like mooing, prowly bassoons. Okay, never mind. We're not talking about that. I'm not dealing with the cello symphony. We're talking about this fabulous disc on Naxos featuring the London Symphony and Steuart Bedford, who is a Britten expert. He worked with him and put things together, suites from his operas and stuff. Oh gosh, he knows his Britten like nobody. And these were all originally on Collins Classics, which was a lovely label run by lovely people. I remember them vividly. They were really, really nice people. The problem was they were absolutely economically clueless. I mean, they took their money, they spent it making mostly marvelous records, especially of British stuff, and then they went bust, leaving behind a catalog of marvelous records. And it was really sort of their misfortune that they came in at the end of the record extravaganza when there just seemed to be endless quantities of money to do everything over and over and over again. Well, that money ran out, and it was running out when they were at their height. And I felt really, really terrible when that happened because they were really a fine label. Fortunately, Naxos picked up the stuff, and it's just as good as it ever was. And there's some stuff that was on Collins that Naxos didn't issue, but they got all the Britten stuff. And this is really probably the most important part of the Collins catalog because every single release was excellent. I mean, there were a bunch of operas. Remember, there was The Turn of the Screw. There was Albert Herring. There was all this orchestral music. There were song cycles. They did all kinds of wonderful Britten discs. And this one contains, are you ready? The symphonic suite from Gloriana, which is really, really good. It's 27 minutes long. It's a big, long, fabulous work full of just terrific music from Britten's biggest failure. His operatic failure. Well, I don't know. Owen Wingrave, I think, is a musical failure. But there are... Gloriana is a wonderful opera. Don't get me wrong. It was written, however, for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. And as is usual in circumstances like that, everybody expected some sort of anodyne, easy to take, not too long because we have to hurry away to a party, expostulation on the glories of the British monarchy. And what they got instead was a probing, even tragic story of, Queen Elizabeth and Essex, who she sentences to death. And it ends with her alone and isolated and solitary, but grand. I mean, it's a wonderful portrait of Queen Elizabeth. It really is. And it's a beautiful work, full of color and pageantry. It has all of that stuff, but it also has a soul. And the last thing people want at a royal coronation is a human soul. We do not want soul. We want, coldness, monumental coldness. That's what those things are. And Britten didn't do it. Isn't it funny? There are all these wonderful stories of composers who don't do what they're supposed to do. There's an exact correspondence actually in Aaron Copland's, what was it, Connotations, I think. It wasn't Inscape, it was Connotations, which was written for the opening of the Kennedy Center, and everybody's thinking, oh, here's America's greatest composer, the opening of Avery Fisher Hall, and Jacqueline Kennedy was there, and all the dignitaries were there for the new piece by America's most popular composer, is their greatest composer, who wrote Appalachian Spring and Billy the Kid and Rodeo. And here he turns out with this 12-tone serial, piece of orchestral mayhem, which is a glorious piece of music. But boy, was that not right for the occasion. Or think of, Shostakovich, who was supposed to write for his Ninth Symphony, this choral apotheosis of Stalin and the communist regime. And he wrote this happy, comedic, charming little Ninth Symphony. I love composers who can't write to order and don't even try. And Britten, in his own way, he was not gonna. I think he thought he was giving them what they expected, because certainly the subject matter was right, but nope, it wasn't. Anyway, so here is a fabulous 27-minute long suite. Next, you get the 4C Interludes Pasacallia from Peter Grimes, wonderfully played, marvelously performed, and marvelously recorded. And last but not least, the Sinfonia Dar Requiem, the only piece here that doesn't come from an opera. This was another example of Britten not delivering what was expected, because it was supposed to have been written for the 7,000th anniversary of the Japanese monarchy, and it was written like just before the outbreak of World War II, somewhere in there. It was the same piece for which Richard Strauss wrote his Japanisches Festmusik, or something like that, which still has not been recorded by anybody other than Richard Strauss, which is kind of interesting in itself, which is another piece of really trashy music. Oh, it's wonderful. But anyway, Britten wrote this piece, Symphonia Dar Requiem. For that, first of all, it was on a Christian theme, which offended the Japanese to no end. And second of all, it was a Christian theme about death. Actually, the end is quite luminous and consoling, but it does start with, terrifying, requiem-ish, fearful thumping on the timpani and bass drum and, angst. And then there's a rondo burlesque sort of thing, like as in Mahler's Ninth Symphony, but it's based on a wonderful Irish tune, but it's sarcastic and bitter and mean. And then there's a beautiful, transfiguring, luminous finale in slow tempo, not grand, not triumphant, not celebratory at all. And he sent this over to the Japanese, and the Japanese sent it right back, saying thanks, but no thanks. Really kind of interesting, these little tales, aren't they, about what happened? I mean, it has nothing to do with music, but they are fun stories nonetheless. And so we have these magnificent performances on Naxos, happily preserved from their original Collins incarnations. And you should just get everything Steuart, Bedford, and Britten on Naxos while you can. Just get it. It's all great. It's all absolutely great. It's the kernel of any serious Britten collection. And you may enjoy other performances, but they're unbeatable. They really are. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.